about the last time she was really well, actually. She's been in a mental institution for the last 2 years. She spent many years on and off in her life in mental institutions. She spent time in mental institutions when I was still with her, and at 3.5 they decided this isn't working. So I went into long-term foster care. This is my foster mum down at the bottom, and it's my foster dad videoing us for another conference, which is really nice. They don't really understand what I'm doing with my PhD, but they're not here to talk to me. So, and then this is my sister. She's just finished her degree. She went into a different foster care placement. And my brother at the bottom eventually went into a foster placement very late, when he was 15. He's done his degree. So it's okay, video.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't want it to interrupt, but it's for my learning. It just helps me see whether I'm progressing in any way. But he's now in Spain and he's teaching English. So as children, we've gone on to succeed. But if you looked at the statistics from third-person research, what it told me, and I researched this when I was at school, was that I had a 13.2% chance of getting a basic qualification. In England, that's GCSEs. Happy days. Looking good for me. I had a 36.6% chance of getting schizophrenia because I had 2 parents. Slater and Carey looked at that. They looked at people who had relatives with schizophrenia. The rest of you as a population have a 1% chance. Looking good for me. I have I'm not exactly sure of the statistics of this, but it's a very high % chance of going to prison. The prison population is massively over-subscribed with children who've left care. Looking forward to that. Or becoming a prostitute, which is a great career prospect. And I only had a 6% chance of going to university, which is very low, obviously. The rest of the population make up a much greater percentage of going to university. So for me, statistics and third-person research was not giving me much hope. and I went on to university. I studied psychology and social policy. There were lots of statistics there that added to my, hope for the future. And what I found is that these statistics are really creating what Merton called in 1968 a self-fulfilling prophecy. They were telling me that as a child in care, you're not going to achieve, you're not going to do anything. If you want to do something, it's not going to be a nice life for you. And I felt this was not hopeful. This did not lead me to think that research was going to be something that was going to add to my life. However, luckily I didn't listen to any of this. What I decided was that I needed a ticket out of here. For me, education was my ticket. I didn't really see education so much about learning and development, although I think I did. But really, for me, it was the ticket. If I can get to my ticket, I will get a job that I enjoy. I will do something meaningful with my life. So my foster family had none of my foster brothers had been to university. My foster parents went to, they loved me, they were very supportive, but they went off for a 2-week cruise to, well not cruise, they were sailing around the islands of Greece, I think, at the time, as I went off to university. Most parents do take their child to university, and it wasn't that my parents didn't support this idea, it's just they didn't have an experience of a child going to university. Obviously, my my biological parents were in no position to take me off to university. So I went round my foster parents' house taking things, going, oh, can I have this? Oh no, you're in Greece, I'll take it. And I went to university, had lots of phone calls afterwards saying, have you seen the washing basket? Yes, I have, it's here. Because you weren't there to ask. So my poor foster parents, they had a little bit of a hard time for me. But I did actually succeed. It took me a little while. I took a year out before I went, I took a year out after my first year. I found the concept of university a little bit hard, as you can imagine. My social workers just, you're going to university, we don't know what to do. Nobody we know has gone to university from care. So there was a lack of understanding of what this meant. But I forged on and I got my 2-1. I was very proud. Probably the most proud thing I've done in education, just because to get a 2-1 I felt was a really big achievement. My trajectory, I've had jobs that I've loved. Absolutely loved everything I've done because I've helped people and I've understood what it's like to know that your trajectories aren't very good and to know that you can overcome those trajectories, and that's what my life has been about in work. And I've gone on now to become a CEO of a charity. We work with carers, so people who have a caring role for somebody in their family who's not very well, who perhaps has schizophrenia, or drug addiction, or a physical illness, or anything like that, and is trying to provide care, sometimes not with much gratitude, often at the expense of themselves. And I realised that I also am a carer for my mum, because I've gone on to go back. Sadly, my dad's now dead, but my mum, I still go and care for her. It's very difficult. She doesn't always appreciate it. And now I'm a PhD student, so I think this trajectory breaks apart this idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And actually, if you go back and read the paper by Martin, he wasn't talking about self-fulfilling prophecies. He was talking about these things that are happening, and these things are created because we carry on telling the same stories. We carry on researching the same things. But if we started to look at the single success, if we look at the single success, like they do in chemistry, and think that those 1,000 failures that went before are not the thing that give us the answer, it is the single success. For me, this is my I'm going to now use this word. This is my theoretical framing for my research, is the fact that I am a single success, and maybe I'm not generalisable, but maybe that's not what's important in research. Maybe this first-person research is important to give us some answers. So this is why I came to first-person research. So Joan came from a different situation. She didn't have the same family background as me. In fact, her working life was about working with people in the care system. So we automatically had some interest, because she had obviously not met many care leavers who'd gone into university. So she was working with children, as I just described, from dysfunctional families, huge emotional suffering. And this distressed Joan. Why was this happening? Why was this helplessness and inadequacy there? So she wanted to find knowledge to enable her to ease their pain, something that she would be able to use. So she went to university to study social work, and she gained a lot of theory and research, but actually it didn't give her that same background of telling her how she was able to gain knowledge that she would be able to alleviate children's suffering. So when she became a practicing social worker, she'd learned that she really needed to draw on herself, her own personality, and though those theories were useful in some ways, they weren't really the answer. So that kind of led her to thinking through how can research do something differently. She had personal experiences that were painful. She'd seen a lot of poverty and violence and oppression, and it made her quite depressed. She wanted to find something that would do something different. And she didn't feel that she was getting that from the traditional social sciences. So what she was really interested in was an improvement in well-being, and something which she could call human flourishing, something that would actually change people's experiences. So Joan went on to do her PhD, and she wanted to create knowledge that would enable a greater understanding of what meaning there could be in a world where suffering was possible. She wanted to explore whether it was possible for human beings to achieve a developmental stage where no one would inflict suffering on each other. You know, she really wanted to look into this. And so she was looking for knowledge about attaining global transformation. So this really changed the idea of that she wanted to move away just from the conventional third-person research to this first-person research. So she was influenced by Cole, and this talks about this idea that there's this external world and your individual world, and that you can't really learn experientially without giving some credence to both of these worlds. You know, you have to think about how they kind of come together in many different ways. You've got your internal experience and you've got this external experience, and they're continually flowing from each other. And this has led to her thinking about the idea that learning transforms experience both objectively and subjectively, this outside and the inside. So this led her, she's now, so she was my supervisor for Masters, she's also supervising PhDs. So she kind of came together with a collaborative inquiry with some of her PhD students. I've been sort of in and out of this, but not quite really part of the central thing. But what they've been really looking at is these three dimensions. So you've got the I, the first person, you've got the I with you, which she calls second person, so the kind of, I guess, participatory research that we've been talking about. But still this third person research. And what she wanted to look at was that, or that not her, but the whole group wanted to look at, was this contention that ultimately the only person that you're able to transform is yourself. And consequently, the way the world will be transformed is by a critical mass of people wanting to take responsibility for their own personal transformation. So they've kind of come together because they feel that there's a kind of growing need for this, really, for people to take this responsibility. So they've been collaborating and writing articles together. I'm just going to read what one of the other people was saying from this collaboration. We want to begin to identify the effects of transformational processes on consciousness, effects on action in the wider world, changes to relationships with others, changes to the inner relationship with oneself that may arise out of shifts in consciousness that we associate with the word transformation. And another person said, we have done damage by creating splits between ideas and personal development. We should be aiming to understand and repair this damage. Society does not encourage the integration of the development of ideas and personal development. This issue needs more thought and debate. If we are not to be limited to conversations about these things without experiential, direct involvement in trying them out, it is going to involve individuals and the sorts of personal transformation that take place in change, healing and growth. Any growth in consciousness involves struggle and adjustment before one feels comfortable with the newly acquired worldview that results. It seems that we are explicitly aiming to educate in the areas of consciousness itself. This in turn will require individuals to take risks, the outcomes of which for some at some stages will be difficult, and they will need support in understanding and handling their experiences. So, they're really thinking about this at this kind of consciousness level. So the points of agreement that we've come up with, we've had this debate that's been going on, we're both really agreeing that we want to encourage and improve human flourishing. That's a central reason that we do our research. It's a central reason that we think first-person research should be valued. We agree that the action-reflection cycles that you go through improve your practice, and they make a difference. So as you reflect and you act, I'm talking to the converted, the significance of values-based research is really important. If we don't own our own values, and we don't own and say and make explicit our values, then we're not really identifying what is important to us in the research and in our lives. So I'm going to go into this a bit more, but we both have this feeling that we don't live in this kind of Newtonian world, but that actually we're part of a participatory universe where what happens affects all of us. I can't act in isolation and it not have an effect on you. Everything is happening is having an effect, and if I'm observing something, it's having an effect on what's happening. And it's important to face the fear of being vulnerable. I think first-person research, people shy away from it, I am sure, because it makes you vulnerable. Because you have to own what you say, you have to take responsibility. People can hold you to account for what you really believe in. And that hurts a lot more than saying, I observed this and this happened and I am completely out of this research. You can criticise this research and you can't hurt me because I'm not in the research. When you own your research, it makes you very vulnerable. And we have to kind of face that fear, because I think it's really important for transformation. So our areas of difference are really our methodologies. So I'm using a living theory methodology. I'm very committed to that methodology, and I find that really inspiring. It's the first time I've come to education and felt, this is going to make a difference. This is actually something I'm interested in. I'm not just doing it as a ticket. I don't need a PhD. Who cares about a PhD? But I'm loving it. So, and for me, what opened that up was living theory and meeting other living theorists that kind of make me feel excited about the world. Whereas Joan feels that there should be no one methodology, and I respect that. I think it's also important to be open to lots of different methodologies. And I'm going to explain why I feel that living theory still gives me that freedom. Perfect. Okay, I'll whiz through this. So living theory, this is my little map of what living theory does. So for me, living theory is very important to have a validation group, because your validation is not the same as repeating it and seeing whether the same thing happens. So instead you have a validation group which tells you whether we're meeting that kind of validity of whether the research is happening in a way that means we can say this is right. And we use Habermas because he said it must be comprehensible, which is always good, isn't it? If you can't read it, then you can't know what you're doing. You have to have the intention of communicating a true proposition. So truth is very difficult philosophically, however, you have to be trying to say what you feel is true. And also this idea of communicating is very important. You need to try to be expressing those intentions truthfully, or I use the word authentically, because I think, is it true to yourself? And also choose an utterance that is right. So these are quite difficult things, but I usually simplify it to say, is it true, is it right, is it comprehensible, and is it authentic? Because even my mum could understand it when I did the video. I think all of this is true. There's also rigor, so testing whether, Melrose I use because I understand his words, is realistic, regular, scrupulous, constant, credible, dependable, confirmable, defensible, honest, ethical, transferable, value to the broader community, and resulting, I love this bit, resulting in practical change and improvement. We're actually going to do something with this. So that's the rigor. Okay, so then values and using them as explanatory principles and standards of judgment. So can I explain what I'm trying to do through my values, and can I use them as a standard of judgment? Can somebody say, do you know, you said that you were trying to be this way or that way, and you were. A commitment to improve practice. A methodological inventiveness, and for me this is why I like living theory, because I may be wedded to one methodology, but I have the opportunity to use a methodological inventiveness and to use things that fit with my values as I'm researching. And so I use many different methods, I just use one methodology to overarch it. An ethical responsibility for human flourishing, the learning of me, myself, of others, hopefully somebody's learning something here, and also for social formations, so actually trying to change the things that are happening. Living contradictions, because I try to live my values in practice, but the way I learn is when I'm not, and how do I change that? And using the ontological eye as opposed to the egotistical eye, so who am I inside, and why does this matter? Okay, so my values are of love, hope, justice, and participation, not a romantic or sentimental love, but a force for compassion and action to improve another's life for the better. Hope is not merely wishful thinking, but an active ability to hold space open for better possibilities. Justice is acting to ensure that people are treated right and fairly and right. And participation is actively engaging people with shaping and changing the world for the better. So the difference for Joan is that she feels that there's a participatory universe, and she looks at things like quantum physics to back this up. She feels that everything is interconnected, and that really, in that case, we really need to think about joining first, second, and third person research. I'm still overcoming my issues with third person research, but I see that there are some benefits to it, because I do use a lot of third person research for funding. You can always show how bad things are for people. So Joan's idea is that she's using her PhD students' research. One researcher is looking at former offenders working with using autoethnography. So this approach challenges the ways of working, and he's using action reflection cycles to help him plan and autoethnography. The other one is working with young people who are not in education, employment or training. And this really is emphasising the mutual influence rather than and so looking at collaboration of trying to bring the personal and not just one way or the other. So the conversation continues. It's been lively and challenging. It's been challenging because of our geographical distance and the fact that we both have very major commitments. I'm running a charity, trying to do my PhD. Joan's trying to support PhD students. Her daughter's just had a baby, and she's acting as a very full-time grandparent. However, it's proved really mutually useful, and I hope it has helped you as well, and it will continue. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just 1 minute.
Wow, you're maybe under.
Sorry, yes, I know. But if anybody wants to ask a comment, Sonia's work.
This is wonderful and really articulate. I love the way you contextualize the whole thing. I think that's key to pushing this first person. The power of the first person is to be able to contextualize it.
Okay, great. So it was comprehensible and it was...
Yes.
I also think we did it was really, I appreciate your courage.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage to do that, and I think that's what we need to have.
yeah,
People
this
feel.
facing that fear, yeah.
Thank you.
Just a question, could you elaborate on, because I struggle with this personally, this idea of human flourishing and living with contradiction?
Yeah.
The fact that the struggle will always be there.
Yeah, and I think the struggle is always there. I think the idea of human flourishing depends on each person and what that flourishing will look like, and trying to really get under the skin of what flourishing is to each person, because it's not going to be going to university for every person. And so I think it's about working with that and understanding that sometimes we do harm unintentionally, but that if we use the action reflection cycles, we can go back and see why did we do harm, can we do it better next time, can we do it to make less harm, and to make more flourishing next time, and trying to reflect on, was it my flourishing or their flourishing, because that's also really important. And that's my minute.
No, thank you very much.
I'm going to thank you very much.